Okay, there we go. Woo! There we go. I'm recording this. Hope you guys don't mind. If anybody doesn't want to be on screen, that's perfectly okay. All right. All right, back to it. Sorry about that. All right. So, yeah, more connection and learning how to be really awesome in your life at the same time. Sounds good to me too. So, we're in the right spot. And welcome to Choosing Connection. You've heard a little bit about me, and I'd love to get to know you all a little bit better. Some of you I already do know quite a bit, Rob being the obvious one there. But for those of you that don't know, my lovely sister Casey is here with us today. And in the chat, if you would share with me where you're from, and then maybe just one little sentence about what you're hoping to get from today's workshop. Drop those in the chat while I figure out where my chat went. There it is. All right. Oh, all right. So Rob, of course, is here with me in Ypsilanti. And where is everybody else from? Deborah, you're in Connecticut. Oh, hey, Deirdre, you're in Connecticut also. So I've actually been there. So that's about all I can say about Connecticut. All right. Cool. All right. Well, we'll carry on. And Rob, if you could call out, Tiffany's from Alabama, and she said she would like to more effectively communicate her feelings. Marcy is in Canada also, in Calgary. And I lost the chat. There we go. Jonathan is in Auburn in Washington. I just psychically divined that. We've been friends a long time. So Marcy said that she wants some fresh ideas to deepen her connection. That is awesome. All right. Well, let's get this party started. I want to acknowledge you all for being here today because it takes courage and commitment to carve out time in your busy life to focus on how you can take ownership of getting the connection you want in your relationships. It's easy to want it, but to actually say, hey, I probably need to do something if I want something is pretty awesome. So yay, pat yourselves on the back. And I'd love to give you a double high five for being here. So if your camera's off, please turn it on for just a sec if you don't mind. You don't have to, but I'd love it if you did so that we can all give each other a few double high fives for making it here. So you can kind of high five the people on your row, turn on your gallery view for a sec. Let's just really celebrate how awesome you all actually are. So yay you. All right. Now back to it. Raise your hand if you are sometimes a perfectionist. That would be me a lot. Ask Rob, he'll tell you. Trying to create connection with your partner or in other high stakes relationships by doing things perfectly can be maddening. If you have ever felt that, you know it, because we can be so mean to ourselves when we mess up. We often get discouraged and give up. I didn't realize until a friend pointed it out to me actually once how often I would say out loud, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid all the time. That was an eye opener. I didn't realize like over little silly stuff. And since then, one of the things I've learned along the way, along with some of my teammates from my coaching group here, is that when I mess up, instead of saying I'm so stupid, I can say something different. I tell myself instead, yeah, I'm so sexy. So let's try that. If you're muted, go ahead and unmute. And we're going to, on the count of three, all of us together say, I'm so sexy. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm so sexy. Great. So I'm going to do everything I can today to make this a seamless, powerful event. But if I make a mistake, like, oh, I don't know, misplace the chat or forget to turn off the music or forget to turn on the video, that's 3 in a row already. I've already been really sexy today. And I might make more mistakes. So feel free to remind me how sexy I am, okay? That's fine. If I mess something up, let me know. Now imagine you are on a rocket ship headed to the moon. Why is it a rocket ship, you wonder? Well, I am, after all, the relationship nerd. So I had to sneak a little nerdiness in here for you. Now, you're on your rocket ship. You're headed straight for the moon. You're on a course. You're not going to deviate. But let's say something unexpected happens and you have to shift course by 1 degree. By the time you've gone the almost 240,000 miles to reach the moon, and yes, I knew that without looking it up, um, that 1 degree shift might find you headed for Mars instead of the moon, which is really awesome if you really wanted to get to Mars, right? Um, so the same thing goes with our workshop today. If we were settling for the moon, but we really wanted to go to Mars, right? We've been bumping along in our lives and maybe things are going okay, and that's fine. But you could have one insight today that could put you on an entirely different trajectory that in a month or even 3 months could result in moving you closer to making the conscious choice to create a connection with the people most important to you that is deeper and stronger. So I would invite you to listen for that 1 degree shift, the one little thing, the one new thing that you can learn and implement right away. I believe, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, and I know some of you really well. So I definitely, absolutely believe this, but I believe this about every single person here, that you can create a profound and joyful connection in your relationships that takes the inevitable conflicts that are going to happen from being the big bad to being a tool that you can actually use to grow even closer. And in order to do that, you'll need to embrace the power you have to choose the course of your life, including your relationships. So to help you get started, really stepping into that power, I'm going to invite you to affirm my core message for you today. The one thing, if you forget everything else we talked about, that you remember this. You guys ready? Connection is a choice. All right. Will you guys unmute and say that with me? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Connection
Connection
is
is
a
a
choice. Awesome. Now, how did it feel saying that? Anyone feel free to pipe up real quick. Did that feel awesome and powerful, or did it feel a little scary? Or somewhere in the middle?
Feels pretty good.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan.
It feels empowering.
Great, Marcy. Well, then you guys are on the right course already. That's awesome. For me, the first time I had that thought, it was a little scary, I'll be honest. So before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that this workshop is primarily focused on the relationship between romantic partners. However, it's 100% applicable to any high stakes relationships you have. So with that in mind, sometimes the language will be about a partner, but it's really applicable to any situation where you're in relationship with somebody. And I've tried to accommodate that as well in how I present it. But with that in mind, what I want you to do right now is just take a moment and sink in and think about the relationship you most want to create connection in. It could be your partner or partners if you have more than one. It could be a family member, a parent, a child, a sibling. It could be a friend you felt some distance with. And thinking of this person, I'd love for you to just really focus on where you want to be with regards to your connection with this person in 1 month. And if you feel like sharing, feel free to drop something in the chat about that. And then as you're thinking about what that looks like in 1 month, and you've got that kind of firmly in your mind, I want you to think about what would that look like? What would you like that relationship to look like in 1 year? Go ahead and drop a line about that in the chat if you feel comfortable. That would be great. So let's see what we've got. Marcy says, more playful. Life is so serious. I love that. Okay. Casey, you got your hand up. Did you want to say something? All right. For a second. Deborah said she'd like to feel safe communicating about the future and be more connected to others in general. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate that. So as you're sinking into this, it sounds like you guys have some pretty beautiful visions laid out there, some really exciting things, some directions to go. That's awesome. So now let's talk about what's it going to take to get there. And I've got some good news. I am not talking to you today about changing the other person because the reality is you can't, right? Sometimes that seems like it would be the easiest solution. But the reality is you don't have control of what anyone else does or doesn't do. So the good news in that is that I'm talking about things today that you have complete control of. They're things you can do and don't need any help from anybody else to do these things. So not many people know this about me, but before I became a coach and speaker, even before my career in HR that Rob was talking about, I wasn't doing so great. I had been stuck in an abusive relationship for many years and only recently escaped. But that's not really important right now. It's just kind of the backdrop, right? So that's a story for another day. But what happened after that is way more important. I lost my job and in that process because I had to move. And so now as a single mom of three, I had picked up a new job, but it was definitely lower paying. Money was super tight. We were all struggling with the trauma of that prior relationship. And I got to tell you guys, I was exhausted and I felt like a failure on all fronts. I was too tired to be as good of a mom as I wanted. It was pretty rough. A training opportunity came up at my new job, and I honestly had planned to skip it because the last thing on earth that I had energy for was a full day of unpaid training on a Saturday. So um, I'm not sure what moved me to do it, but I decided to sign up for the training anyways. I think it's just because I was new on the job and I didn't want to look bad. So during that training, they asked us to write a personal mission statement. So basically, to think about our life as if it was a business we were running and what would our mission be. And so I'm going to share with you guys what I wrote down that day. And this is how I've been living my life ever since. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. In a second. Any second. It's okay. Yep, I'm being sexy. You can tell me.
You're doing great.
This went much smoother when I practiced it. There it is. Phew. Just trying to make it big enough so you guys can actually see it. All right. And, okay, well, it went back to being small. So, yep. So this is what I wrote, and I actually typed it up the next day on this little sheet of paper, and it's been on my bulletin board at every job I've had ever since. I believe I am defined by my choices. It's my responsibility to own the power that I have to shape my life so that I live with quality, impact, and meaning. So why is that important? It's because that choice that I made, and I just did it for, random reasons to attend that training, actually was my 1 degree. That's where my life started shifting. And it took a long time. I had to go through a lot more miles, not quite to the moon, thank goodness, before things changed in a big way. But that was the start of it. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Those decisions that we make are super important, and every choice we make has ripples and can be that change in trajectory that's going to make things massively different in your life. So this is why I'm passionate about the power of choice. It started me on the path that I'm about to share with you all, and it got me to the successful, empowered, joyfully partnered place I am at today. And I'm not just saying that because he's in the room. Rob's pretty awesome. And so when I think about the power of choice, especially as it applies to creating harmony and connection in my relationships, I am so grateful for that 1 degree choice that I made a long time ago before I even met this guy. So let me tell you a little bit more about kind of how this has rippled out. Rob, is it okay if I tell on us a little bit?
I think so. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, love. I really appreciate your willingness to be a little vulnerable with me. That's part of the shift, you guys. This would not have happened before. So before we actually got married, Rob and I were on a big trip. We had traveled from here in Michigan all the way out to Las Vegas. We flew out there. We had a 15-hour layover in Vegas, so we planned on catching a show and then getting some rest because we had a whole lot more of our trip left. But the hotel room I had planned fell through, so we spent the entire 15 hours awake and on foot. So we did catch our show, and we also walked the entire Las Vegas Strip from one end to the other. Um, got to have a 2 a.m. breakfast at Denny's, of all places, on the Strip. And then we flew to San Diego for the next phase of our trip. And shortly after that, we got to drive over the Sierra Nevada mountains from San Diego out to the desert, out south of Palm Springs, because that's where my mom lives. And the plan was for Rob to meet my mom for the first time. So we reached the top of the mountain, and there's a little winding road going down to the desert floor from the mountain above. And the locals there call it Montezuma. They call it that because it's guaranteed to make you lose your spit, if you know what I mean. So Montezuma's revenge, but not because of the usual reason. Rob was driving as we approached that downgrade, and he was really nervous. At least he seemed like it to me because he'd never driven that road before, and it's pretty intense. He slowed way down and definitely looked nervous and anxious. And so I asked him if he wanted me to take over. I'd driven this road hundreds of times and I felt pretty comfortable with it. My intention in that moment was to ease his stress, knowing that we were both pretty exhausted and he was probably already a little bit anxious about meeting my mom for the first time. I know I was when I met his mom. Anyways, so I was also, though, feeling a little bit embarrassed when cars would pass by us. And I have zero poker face. If you know me, you know that. So Rob got pretty defensive, and feeling that element of judgment in my tone and my look just really crushed him because he was already feeling whatever he was feeling. He was pretty snippy back for a second. And when I acted all baffled and confused about why he was acting that way, he shut down completely. To be fair, he also had to concentrate on the road. So that might have been part of him being very quiet. But anyways, his shutdown at that point was a huge trigger for me back then, as it reminded me so much of the stonewalling that I would get from my ex. And I'm not sure what took hold of me. It was, no excuses, but I was exhausted too. And it just hit that nerve. And I made a really interesting choice. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, I yelled at this man all the way down that mountain. I was just so frustrated with him going into another shutdown. Um, so it was pretty intense. And on the good side, we did not plummet to our deaths off the cliff, a la Thelma and Louise, but we did arrive at my mom's pretty exhausted and both of us just shaking. I mean, it was really emotionally intense for both of us. Talk about awkward. And so that was not our best day for sure. And here's why I'm sharing this, even though it's embarrassing for both of us, mostly me. At any point along that path, either one of us could have chosen differently and changed the whole conversation and how our day went. So luckily, we did sort it out the next morning once we'd gotten some sleep and the best pancakes either one of us have ever had at a little hole in the wall outside LA. Yeah, those were good. Like, yeah. So drop in the chat if you would for me any of the other spots in that conversation besides me choosing not to scream at him, because that one's pretty obvious. But think if you can of any other spots where either one of us could have chosen differently. Oh, I missed Deirdre's
That's okay.
vision earlier. That's really beautiful, Deirdre. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Okay. Thank you. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Yeah, we could have chosen to reassure one another at some point, Deborah. Yep, for sure. Yep. Deirdre, I could have just kept my yap shut in the first place and let him do his thing. Or he could have said, why, thank you. That would be lovely if you drive.
I should have. Yes.
Or he could, as he's saying, he's calling himself out. He could have expressed his anxious feeling in a better way. We could have chosen a different time to drive. We could have changed our plans. That is absolutely true. These are great ideas, you guys. All right. So sadly, we did none of those things and it did not go well. But now we can choose differently because we're a little smarter and we've worked hard at it. So how do you go about doing that? Well, as you can imagine, I can't teach you everything I know about getting empowered and joyful in your relationships by choosing connection in the short time we have together today. So for those of you dedicated to getting that conscious powered up connection, I'll share more about how we can continue to work together later. Okay? Awesome. Now, my notes will cooperate. Too far. Let's get on with learning some of the ways that you can consciously choose connection. A lot of disconnection in any relationship comes from one or both people just not feeling heard and understood. So how do you choose more understanding? So you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. At any point, we could have gotten more interested in what was going on for the other person instead of just sticking with our story. In the story I just shared, I think, of course, that me choosing to yell at Rob was pretty crummy. That's pretty obvious, but we could have headed it off before then. One of the things that could have made a huge difference is if I had owned my feelings of embarrassment and spoke to that, and that they had caused me to have a tone or a look that had come across to him as judgmental instead of acting all shocked and surprised. Instead, I doubled down on, oh, I just want to help. And Rob didn't feel heard or seen. So not surprisingly, he shut up. In that moment, Rob could have owned how anxious he was and that he was embarrassed for feeling anxious. He called that out himself. And that might have given me the wiggle room to make it easier for me to own my part. But either way, we didn't make those choices, and we could have made a choice that would left either one of us feeling more supported instead of focusing on, it wasn't me, I didn't do anything wrong. And that's an easy place to go, because when someone is coming at us with something hard to hear, we naturally get defensive. It's human nature. We can't help that we feel that. We can't help that we feel that defensiveness if we feel it. So which do you think would be better, though? Understanding each other or screaming down the mountain? Which one's going to be more connective? No contest, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know making those choices when you're in the middle of a snag is a lot easier to say than to do. We tend to resist it because we're afraid that we'll be left with all the blame. At least that's how it is for me a lot of times. That we'll do our part, but the other person won't. And we'll be left feeling unheard and unseen, and that hurts. The truth is, though, we can't control what the other person does. But when we express our feelings with real ownership, we're more likely to be heard. I feel sad and small when you shout at me. If Rob had said that, it would hit a lot different than if he had said, and he didn't, by the way, but if he had said, stop yelling at me, you jerk, right? If our goal is to be heard, we have to take ownership of how we're sharing our concerns. So before you start to share something that you're upset about, it's one of the things you can choose is to take a deep breath and remind yourself of the goal. Why are you sharing this? Yeah, you might have a frustration that you want to resolve, but ultimately it's because you don't want to feel that frustration because you want more connection. So being heard and understood is the goal for both of you. You want to hear them and understand them. You want them to understand you so that you can solve the problem constructively and feel closer. By consciously choosing to remind yourself of this and then consciously choosing to speak your feelings and your needs with ownership, you are choosing connection over disconnection. And that's a choice. It's not something that just happens if we're conscious about it. If you just kind of go on autopilot, your animal brain, your nervous system is going to take over, that's feeling defensive and wants to protect you. Because when you hear those things, or when you're talking about something that you're upset about, or if you're hearing things from your partner or the person you're in a relationship with in a way that is frustrating and upsetting to you, it's normal and natural to feel like you're being attacked. And our body reacts to that just as if somebody was coming at us with a big old knife, right? So we can consciously choose differently, but you have to think about it. And that's why it's important to talk about it when you're not upset, which is why I applaud you all for being here, because that's kind of putting that into your brain so that when you're in that really difficult spot, it's easier to pull up. So consciously choosing to remind yourself of the goal of connection, and then consciously choosing to speak your feelings. By doing that, you're creating space for your partner to also choose that and making it more likely that they will. They still have to make their own choices, but you're giving them more room to do that. So let's break this down just a little bit more. And suppose your partner initiated the conversation. They're coming to you with a complaint. So they voiced a complaint or concern of some kind that has you feeling accused and on the defensive. And maybe you genuinely don't feel like you did anything wrong, so there's nothing for you to own in the moment. So how do you come with ownership in that space? There's always something you can own. So in this context, it doesn't mean apologizing for doing something wrong. It just means being 100% real and transparent about what you're feeling. So the choice point is to own your feelings before you respond. So that might look like, hey, I hear you and I want to understand, right? You're calling out that your goal is connection. And I'm feeling a little defensive right now. That lets them know your intention, that you're here for the connection and you want to understand, but it's hard right now because you're feeling defensive instead of saying you're making me feel defensive, right? So yes, what they did is what triggered that in you, but it's yours. So if you own it as yours and speak it as yours, you're much more likely to get heard, which is the goal, right? So, oops, I lost my spot. So sexy. So anyways, oh, and that also helps them too, because then they're not trying to guess what's going on for you. If you're just very clear and transparent and speaking what you're feeling, instead of guessing by looking at your face and trying to decipher it and maybe making up a story that's even worse than that you're feeling a little bit defensive, that helps them out too, because then they're not playing a guessing game on their side. So those both help de-escalate the situation. You're not coming at them with those you statements that we hear so much about, but that are hard to remember in the moment if we don't have something to replace them with. So this is why it's important to practice and to be aware of this stuff before you're in that spot. So yeah, it can prevent it from escalating further. And then the other big choice you can make when you're in a snag, because communication is probably the most connective thing that we have, right? That's how we deal as human beings. We communicate, we talk, we read body language. So the other big choice to help with the communication, which will lead to the connection that you want, is to take the time to make sure your partner gets heard before sharing your concerns. Yeah, that's hard for me. I'm not gonna lie. In the past, I used to get really hung up on why do I always have to be the one? I didn't like it. I thought that's no fair. And the truth is, if I want the outcome of more connection, I need to be the one if the other person isn't there yet and I am. Now, of course, if there's a huge imbalance over time, you may need to make some different choices about the relationship. I'm not advocating a one-way relationship. I would never tolerate that. And please don't choose that for yourself. I hope you're not. But there's going to be some give and take, and there's going to be times when you're more resourced and more able to make that choice. So getting over that idea of, oh, why do I always have to go first? It was hard and it took me a while. But once I got over that, a really cool thing started happening. When I made the choice consciously to be a relational leader and go first as often as it takes, I can honestly say I was rather pleasantly surprised that Rob started taking the lead a lot more often. And he started trying to understand me when I was upset way more than he did before. And now I would say it's pretty even. So it took some time for both of us to figure that out. But the sooner you choose it for yourself, the sooner you can get on that path. And I wish I had gotten over it, this whole idea of I don't want to be the one to go first, so much sooner. So what does it actually look like when you're making that choice? So think about how you would like to be listened to. If you wouldn't mind, share in the chat what it looks like when someone is listening to you the way that makes you feel good and heard and understood. Just like one little sentence about something that they can do that makes you feel really heard. Marcy says not on their phone or their video games looking at you, just really giving you their undivided attention. Yep. Very nice. Some acknowledgement about what you're talking about, for sure. Yep. One more. I see you typing, Deirdre. Rob says, when you ask me what's up or how I'm feeling, instead of assuming my 1,000-mile stare means I'm in bad shape. We might have talked. Acknowledging the situation. Yep. And we've got being totally present and wait till I'm through with my thought before they respond. Yeah. For instance, don't be planning their response, overhearing me deeply and what I'm saying. Absolutely. So go figure, the things that work for you work for other people too, oddly enough. So yeah, it's pretty simple. All of these things are easy to do as long as you choose them. You can choose to listen to understand. For me, it helps first to acknowledge my own feelings to myself. That's just something I kind of do when I'm really stressed out, but I want to hear what the other person is saying. I just talk to myself a little bit, a little self-talk, give myself a little hug, say, hey, I feel whatever it is, anxious, mad, sad, whatever, and that's okay. By giving myself that little bit of validation, it helps me be better able to focus my intent to hear the other person. So let's go ahead and unmute real quickly and pick a feeling that you might be feeling now or have felt recently. And you're just going to acknowledge that and give yourself permission to feel it. Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Relaxed.
I am anxious.
Joyful.
Hey,
Depression.
awesome. You guys did great. All right. So yeah, then I remind myself that I have the choice. And that's really, like I said, I'm going to keep coming back to that because that's the whole point here. At any point, you can choose. So even if you've messed up and you've done it wrong, you can choose differently in that moment. So even if the person is speaking to you from a high state of emotion and they're using words that are hard to hear, they're using those use statements that feel like accusations, and they're, for lack of a better word, doing it all wrong, right? You still have a choice. You can listen and take it in and be ready to respond in a way that's connective, or you can let your reactivity get the better of you. That's a choice. So if your goal is connection, correcting their improper approach is not your job. Hearing them and trying to understand is, and you can choose that, right? It's hard. It's not easy, but you can. Either way, no matter what their behavior is, your choice is yours. You own it. It belongs to you. So even if their behavior is bad, you doubling down and also behaving in a way that's not connective is probably not going to get you anywhere if your goal is connection. Now, the higher stakes relationship, the higher the stakes of the relationship, the harder it is to hear those you statements or when they're coming at you in a way that feels like an attack. You know, if it's Joe Schmo down the street, big deal, right? If your own activation is getting in the way and making it really hard to choose to listen instead of react, that's okay, because you still have choices. You're not stuck with, oh, but I decided I was going to listen and I have to do that no matter what. You can try and listen anyway, of course, that's an option. But if you're really activated, you can also choose to be vulnerable and transparent and let them know that and ask for some space to work through it. So what does that look like? You could say something like, wow, I really want to hear you and understand, and I'm really feeling defensive about the way you just said that. I would really appreciate a break so that I can refocus my intention to really be able to hear you. I said that once already before, but that's kind of a really important one to learn, and you can put it in your own words, but the general idea is there. Because the other option, if you're trying to take a break at that moment, which is not a bad idea if you're really blown out, is you could say something like, the way you're talking to me is making me really, really defensive and I need a break. Now, both basically asking for the same thing, but one is going to be a lot more easy for them to hear and not continue to escalate. Because if you are telling them that they're making you feel defensive, Now they're in the same boat that you were just in when you felt defensive because you were hearing you statements, right? So you're actually escalating at that point. That's a choice that you made. So ownership is huge, guys. It's the critical difference. And it's hard because especially if the other person isn't owning their part at all. So it might feel good to just be in the same boat with them and make them feel defensive too by coming back at them. You made me feel this way and I need a break. It might even feel justified, right? Because they're maybe behaving not great, and you can choose that. But the reality is when you do that, you're choosing consciously disconnection and escalation over connection. So it's definitely something to sit with and consider when you aren't in an escalated, elevated mood and things aren't going awry, and just really think about it. How do I want to be in relationship with this person? Do I want to be justified and right, or do I want to be in connection with them? And ultimately, it's your choice, at least so far as what you're bringing to the table. Now, as we know, as we've mentioned before, you can't make the choice for them. They have to choose also to communicate in a way that promotes connection. But you can make it for yourself, and that will make it easier for them to also choose that. And you're also setting them a really beautiful example of what that looks like in case they don't know. Okay. So let's imagine for a second that you've made the choice to stay in listening mode. What now? So you're going to listen carefully, then reflect back to them what you heard them say. And I think a lot of people are familiar with that idea of, reflective listening as a concept. But what I also see a lot of times when I'm working with my couples is they kind of get the idea, but the way they go about it is they hear what's being said and then they interpret it through their filters and their thoughts and then give back their paraphrased interpreted version. So I would say it's a better choice for connection if you don't try and interpret it and just literally say back to them what you heard as closely to their words as you can. And the reason for that is, it might feel like, oh no, but I'm trying to understand. So I'm going to kind of see if I get it. But if you give it back to them exactly the way they gave it to you, more or less, as best you can remember, that's going to help you out two ways. One, for sure, you're not putting any of your own stuff into it. And then also, they're going to hear what they said to you. So if what they said to you was really harsh, they're going to hear that. And then that might give them pause to say, well, actually, what I meant was, and kind of dial that back and reach for connection themselves. Okay. So that is really helpful. And then once you've reflected back to them, like I said, as closely as you can to their words, then you're going to check with them. Is that right? Did I get that right? You want to check. A lot of times, another mistake I see people make frequently when they're trying to be really good reflective listeners is assuming you got it. I heard you, I repeated the words back, I got it right, yay me, I understand now. But maybe you don't. Maybe they didn't even say it the way that made sense to them. Maybe they were struggling to express it. So it's really important to do that check and make sure that you got it. And sometimes that takes more than one try, it takes several. So just if they say, well, no, not quite, then keep asking questions until you do get it right. So, you might say, okay, well, what part was right? And what did I miss? Just get curious. Let yourself be curious. Like, what's going on for that person? If you can focus on the curiosity over the, whatever feelings are coming up for you in that moment, you'll be better able to hear and understand what they're going through. And like I said, the better understood they feel, the more likely they are to want to hear you. So I had to choose that a lot of times, more than once. I had to unlearn the habit. I'm a storyteller. So when I'm reflecting back to people, I have a really bad habit, or have had, of interpreting it. And I still struggle with that sometimes, but I think I'm getting better. What do you say, Rob? He's my fact checker over here. And he's muted. That's okay.
I know. I always forget that I'm muted. You're
Yeah,
doing
no worries.
awesome.
So it's important to check and make sure you got it. And you don't got it until they say you do, right? So until they're saying, yep, you understood that completely, you're not done. Okay. So by now, I'm sure you probably have a burning question in your mind. Okay, this is great. These are good tips and all. And nuance, even if you were aware of reflective listening. Okay, cool. That's awesome. But what about me? When do I get to get heard? In case we forgot, I'm over here not feeling heard. That is valid. So as you're finishing up and you're understanding your partner or the person that you're in relationship with, you want to make sure you validate what you heard from them once you got it. Validating that doesn't mean you agree. It just means now that you understand where they're coming from, it makes sense to you why they feel that way. And that's the thing a lot of people get hung up on, is they don't want to validate because they think they're agreeing. You're just saying that, yep, I get it. That was your experience, because that was their experience. Even if their experience was really weird to you, that's what was their experience. And now you understand that. So now that their nervous system is a little bit calmer because you've heard them and they've been able to express themselves and you validated that, yeah, I get it. That makes sense to me. Now they're going to be a lot better able to hear you. So now is when it's your turn. And what you don't want to do is then turn around and ramp them back up with more you statements, right? So again, we're back to the ownership piece. I mean, you can choose that. That's a choice. But the reality is, if you go right back to those you statements and being really harsh with them, it's going to ramp right back up. So if your goal is connection, the choice here, the ninja move for that, to avoid ramping them back up while they're listening to you, is ownership, right? Own the story. Own the story. So whatever is going through your mind, whatever happened for you, whatever your experience was, it might be completely different from theirs, even though you were in the same place at the same time. But it's yours, right? And just like theirs was completely valid as far as that was their experience, so is yours, and it deserves to be heard. And the way to have that happen is to lead with ownership of it. Hey, I have a story that when you, whatever the thing was they did, it means whatever it meant to you. And I'm feeling whatever you're feeling, right? So in the case of the car trip down the steep and dangerous mountainside, for me, I could have said, hey, Rob, I have a story that when you shut down, it means you hate me and you're going to leave. And I'm feeling really scared about that. Because, okay, took a long time to get there, but that's really what that's all about, right? Maybe don't have that conversation in the car. I don't know, maybe do. But that's really what was going on for me. And so if I had just said that, I'm guessing, knowing what I know about him, that he would not have shut down. He would have been, oh no, that's not what I'm feeling. I'm just feeling whatever he's feeling, right? So does that make sense, guys? Does it make sense if we express it that way, that we're a lot more likely to get what we want and what we need, which is to be heard and understood? Does that make sense? Thumbs up?
Yep.
Yes, no, maybe? All right, awesome. So easier said than done. And that's, again, why it's really important to talk about it when you're not upset and really internalize that and sit with that yourself and kind of get okay with that. And it's scary and it's hard, because the more we own, it feels like we're putting ourselves out there, and it's a really vulnerable feeling. But even if the other person behaved badly and you didn't really do anything in the situation, as far as you can tell, that's something you can own, and that gives them more room to own their part. So you can always own your feelings and your interpretation inside your head of what the behavior they're doing meant to you. And of course, there's always other things you can own. Things like if it's something that's been stewing for a while and you didn't say anything, and instead you were just kind of walking around being mad and slamming cupboards, and I don't know anybody that does that. Manically washing dishes, I don't know. You can own that too. Hey, I should have spoke up about this sooner, but I was just feeling really anxious about sharing it. Like, the more real you get, the more vulnerable and just speak your feelings you get, it makes it a lot easier for people to hear that without getting defensive. Makes sense? Yay. All right. So I spent most of the time for this on that communication piece, because I think that's the most impactful for relationships. But let's shift gears a little bit away from choosing connection in your communication and talk about rituals of connection. So what are some things you can consciously choose on a day-to-day basis to increase connection? You guys want to drop some ideas in the chat? I'll share while you guys are typing some of the things that Rob and I do that we've talked about and agreed on, and we're doing it on purpose, not just stuff that just happens, is we go to bed at the same time together at night, 99% of the time. Sometimes that's hard because one of us has stuff to do and the other one might be tired, but we stay on the same schedule as far as that goes. Marcy's saying update each other on our days when home from work. So that reconnection time right after work, super important. Awesome. And again, this doesn't have to be romantic relationships. It could be your family and friends. Like with my mom, we have a lot of traditions and stuff that we do on Mother's Day. We send back and forth this little, it's one of those little kissing balls and with a little pressy in it. So one year she gets it, the next year I get it. You know, all these little things add up and they help you connect with the people that matter to you. So it's important to consciously plan for that and not just hope that they happen on accident. Making the relationship a priority. So you're teaming up, you're making your love story epic. You're doing those things. And these are things, you know, you've heard of, I'm sure, but it's one thing to hear about it and another to consciously plan it and do it and commit to it. So that commitment, putting the relationship as a priority and committing to it, to schedule date nights, finding hobbies you enjoy together, like have your own hobbies. I would say, for me at least, I enjoy more when we do something new together than if I try to do his thing or he tries to do my thing. But whatever works for you guys, right? So talk about that. Find out what you like to do together and go do it. And growing together. So here's, you know, if you're growing together, you're glowing together, right? If any of you have ever been part of a group of any kind that helps support each other, and I know some of us here are in one now, and it's awesome. Cheering each other on as you grow is a huge, big deal. So encourage each other in your growth efforts. That's definitely super connective. Respect. It's really easy. It's shockingly easy to fall into the very bad habit of talking to your partner in ways you wouldn't talk to a complete stranger because you're safe and you're comfortable. So being really mindful about the way we speak to our partner or our close relationships, our friends. Don't get lazy about that, right? We can choose to be very aware of that and say to ourselves, you know what? I'm going to treat this person is the most important person to me, or one of my closest friends. Why on earth would I ever treat them worse than somebody down the street? But we do it if we're not paying attention. So the choice there is to pay attention to that and make it important for yourself. Life's full of surprises. So we're ready to ride the waves together. One of the ways that you can strengthen your connection is to really consciously choose to be aware of that and know that you're going to bend, you're going to sway, bumps are going to come up in the road, but committing to, hey, whatever it takes to do, we're going to do it. So that's, using your resources, whether it's your time, your money, your talents, your abilities, whatever it is, to give to the relationship will definitely help build connection. And I'm sure you guys have some great ideas. If you want to drop those in the chat real quick, let's crowdsource a little bit. I'm sure you guys all have things that you know of that really build connection with the people in your life. So go ahead and drop a few of those. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up with that as you're typing those out, because I want to make sure that I'm able to answer any questions you guys have. And I promise to share with you all how we can continue to work together if you're really committed and excited to create connection in your relationships. But first, while you're thinking about all of that, I have one last question for you. How are you feeling now about your ability to choose more connection in your relationships? Have you found your 1 degree? It's okay if not, but if you have, give me a thumbs up. If you're not sure yet, maybe on the side. And if it was, that's okay too. Go ahead and give me a thumb. Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, so while you guys are typing, as promised, I'm going to share with you how we can continue to work together to help you step up into your power and create connection and level up your relationships. I appreciate all of you being here, and as a thank you, you'll be getting a free gift from me. You will all be getting a free couples connection session. This can be on your own or with your partner, and we'll work together in a 45-minute session to do some custom laser coaching on one or two things that are getting in the way of your connection. You know, those arguments that you just can't seem to get past that keep popping up over and over again, stuff like that. And we can get you some specific tools that are unique and customized for your situation in that session. Rob's dropping the scheduling link for, oh, no, sorry, that was the old one. So Rob's going to be dropping a link that's going to be a little survey because I would like your feedback on the event, and there's going to be a spot on there for you to check and let me know you want to get that scheduled, and then we'll email you the link to schedule that session. So also for those of you who are in my Facebook group, Relationship Level Up with the Relationship Nerd, you're also going to be receiving another free gift. So keep an eye on your email. You'll get that a little bit later tonight. And if you have time right now, the link that Rob just dropped is just a quick feedback form. If you could go ahead and fill that out right now, I would appreciate it. And I just wanted to let you guys know, I am so inspired by all of you being here today. I really appreciate you being here today. I appreciate your support and encouragement along the way. Most of you are people I know, so thank you for that. And to those of you who are new to relationship nerdiness, welcome, welcome. And I'd really love all of your feedback. So please don't be shy. I really want to make sure I'm bringing the most value I can to the awesome people out there that want to choose connection. I will be doing this again. And so anything that you feel like could be better, I would love to hear about that. Don't be shy at all about that. And thank you for being the kind of amazing human that values choosing connection. You are all awesome, and you're making the world a better place. And with that, I've got a few minutes left and I'll stay on. I want to, respect your time. So if you've got to hop off right at 8, that's fine, but I'll stay on for another 10, 15 minutes if anybody has questions they want answered. And thank you already for the comments. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Awesome.
If you have a question, go ahead and either raise your Zoom hand, raise your physical hand, or you can drop it in the chat, whatever feels good. And if you've got to hop off, that's okay. Good night. Appreciate you being here. Have a great one. Thanks.
I'll raise my hand.
Okay, what's up, Deirdre? For it.
Yeah, just, you know, I'm good with it, but what do you do with someone who, like my ex-husband, he doesn't speak to me since 2008. And he makes it awkward, you know, for the children.
Yeah,
He makes it awkward for everyone, every time, anytime we're in the same space. Where he'll even say, if I say hello, he'll say, don't say hello to me. So that's where he's at. And as I said, I've done all my work. So whenever he's ready, I'm there with open arms. At the same time, it would be nice, and I'm not attached to having him speak to me, but it would be lovely. It just would be really lovely if,
yeah, that's a tough one. And it's really
you can't make, in other words, you
sorry.
can't make someone speak to you if they don't want to.
Exactly. So
I've accepted all of that. It's just, I didn't know if you had a magic pill around that.
No, there unfortunately, I don't think there really is one, but it's really about focusing on what you can control and making choices around that. Yeah. And if he wants to be like that, you gotta let him. I would say the focus for that might be really working with your connection with your kids, which I know is fabulous, but just being really present and available for them when that's awkward for them. I mean,
We're all good.
That's where your
We're all
choice
good.
point is, is just, hey, it is what it is, and we're in it together. Yeah.
It's
I'll
really
think about that. If I have any brilliant ideas, I'll definitely email you.
Yeah, thanks.
That's a tough
It's an,
one.
it's an awesome situation given that, because my boys they love both of us equally.
Mhm.
They just accept him for who he is and me for who I, it's really, it couldn't be any better that way. So, but it would just be, it still keeps, it would just be so nice to celebrate like their birthdays or something together.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that separateness, right? The biggest suffering in the world is separation. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, it
Yeah,
is,
it's sad that he's choosing that.
yeah,
It
it's a,
is.
it's a choice. It's a
It
choice.
is. It is. And he gets to make it.
Yeah.
Sucks for you because that's not the choice.
It's been a long time. Like I'm totally in acceptance, but, and I don't believe it will never change. So it's whenever he's ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is tough.
You rocked it, Wendy. It was great.
Yes, anything is possible. Don't give up on that for sure.
Oh,
You never
no,
know.
like, and so much of what you shared, that's how I live. But,
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'll be here. Like I said, I'm just gonna hang out. If you guys have anything else you want to share or talk about, that's fine. Jonathan, it's nice to see you. It's been a while. Hopefully we'll get to see you next week while we're in town.
When you said you were from Auburn, Jonathan, I was thinking Auburn, Michigan. I was like, wow, that's pretty close.
Yeah, there's a few Auburns out there.
Yeah.
It's like when I was living in Duluth, Georgia. They've got Duluth, Minnesota, and Duluth all over the place. It's like,
and Deborah, I just want to say hi to you. I haven't seen you since a breakout room. I don't know. It's been a while. Good to see you.
I'm working on it. I'm
I
working
knew
on
I recognized you.
it.
Retired school teacher with disabilities. Yep, I know who you are.
Having a
I
blast.
listen deeply.
I
do
know,
reflect-
I know you do. And you gave